a regular basis. McDonald's, Burger King, and Chick-fil-A may be delicious, but they do not count as health food. Yes?
I have a question.
Yes?
I have a problem with like YouTube. I tell myself I'll just, watch like a show for 30 minutes and then I'll go back to do what I'm supposed to do. 3 hours will go by and I wasted so much time.
So that's what I want to talk to you about for the rest of today. We're going to talk about managing your time. Because you may not be rich, we may never be rich, but we have something that is a resource that cannot be bought with money, and that is time. How you manage your time is going to determine how you live your life. YouTube, you and I are in the same boat. Because YouTube has the horrible thing that has the little windows at the bottom. So you're watching Angry Cat and then they're like, oh, Angry Marmoset. Oh, look at this, Armadillo. Look at this. 3 hours later, you're still watching, look at this. So that is the problem with, time management. And that is something that we need to address. Because it is not just YouTube. It is, you're on YouTube, I'm going to text my friend and tell her I just saw Angry Cat on YouTube. So they text you back, oh, but did you see Angry Cow? And you're like, Angry Cow. So now you are, multiple distractions taking away from your time.
Is that somewhat like, remember what I said earlier when I said sometimes if I'm doing something, I get frustrated, I kind of just like, I might go just eat or listen to music or just do something that I want to do in order to alleviate my stress. But she said she watched YouTube videos. Maybe she watched YouTube videos to relieve her stress when she got leave track of time.
Yeah, and then adds more stress.
So the question is, something like watching YouTube videos or going to Facebook or whatever social media people use these days. I don't know much about it. It is the way to avoid what you're doing, right? So I'm working on this paper. So I'm just going to complain to you the task that I hate the most, the thing that I hate the most in my life, I never thought I will hate it so much, is grading. Okay? How many of you have to grade papers on a regular basis? Now, I teach writing intensive classes, meaning that my students are turning in 15 to 20 page papers, and I have to return drafts, and they sit on my desk, and I look at them and I want to cry. So I have papers, and I have Angry Cat. What am I going to choose, right? So that is part of the problem. You have these data analysis you have to do, and it's going to take you 6 hours. Or you can go and watch, cute peoples on YouTube. So it's a way to avoid doing what you're doing. So it produces more stress because all of a sudden you look at the clock and you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 3 hours. So you realize that you have wasted your time. You have wasted your wealth.
Can this be true? I perform better under pressure than when I got time to do stuff.
Okay, so the question is, you perform well under pressure. And I'm going to answer that question the rest of the talk because what happens when you're under pressure is you have a timeline, you have a deadline, so you have a goal for when things are supposed to happen. So normally when we have deadlines and timelines, whether they're imposed by us or by others, we do better at managing time in order to get things done.
Yeah.
The problem is when you have this free blanket time, and then we just think we have time for everything, and then it doesn't work out. So my thesis here is going to be that if you manage your time very well, you can take control of the situation. If you take control, you're going to reduce uncertainty. As you were saying, you have a deadline, you know when things are due. I just tell you, write a dissertation. When is that due? When am I supposed to have things done by? You don't have a goal that you're looking forward to. You don't know when things are supposed to be done. So that is going to increase uncertainty. But if you manage your time very well because you're taking control over things, you're going to reduce frustration, you're going to reduce uncertainty, you're going to reduce conflict. That is going to lead, in the long term, to much less stress. Lower levels of stress when you are not stressed out. And remember that we said there's a moderate level of stress that's good. When you're not in that point where you're in that 600 on the scale, you're going to be a lot more productive, a lot more creative, you're going to feel better. And whenever you're healthier, you're also going to perform better. So when so much is out of your control, like the experience in graduate school or the experience of starting a new job, managing your time is the best strategy that you have in order to prepare for your future. So let's think about time management. And you have this little table on your handout. Try to answer these questions very quickly. Do you keep a weekly calendar? Just circle yes or no. Do you think this is something that helps you manage your time? Just circle yes or no. Do you keep a yearly calendar, meaning that you could look at the whole year and see when things are due? Have you entered in your calendar your program deadline requirements? So, if you're thinking, if you're at the dissertation stage, you know when dissertations are due to the graduate school? Do you put that in your calendar? Is that something that you think will help you manage your time? Do you have a to-do list? And that to-do list, do you prioritize it on a daily basis? Yes or no? Is this something that helps you manage your time?
So so I started making a to-do list, and I realized some of the things that we have around us every day can help us manage our time if we decide to use them. I know when I see my uncle's a lawyer, he's like a super lawyer. And one day I asked him to do something. We go hang out. He's like, I don't got time. I'm like, When I say in his iPad on his calendar, I see all these dots for every day. I was looking and I was like, look like he got a busy schedule. But when I start doing what he did, I realized, wow, yeah, now I see how he could not have time.
And that is going to be part of that scheduling and that, making those to-do lists, just kind of knowing what you have to do. So, do you set a specific time in the day or the week to work only on your degree requirements? Now, you mentioned dissertation as a great stressor. So my question to you will be, do you have set times to work on writing your dissertation? Do you use your phone to browse the web for entertainment when you're waiting in line, for example? Is that your entertainment time? Do you postpone tasks until you're mentally ready to start them? So I'm going to write my dissertation when I feel relaxed. Do you answer emails as soon as they arrive or texts as soon as they arrive? And do you schedule tasks based on your energy level? Today I'm not feeling, very energetic, so I'm not going to work on these tasks. I'm going to work on something else. So let's go to the next table that you have. How often do you update your calendar? Do you have a calendar? That should be the first question. How often do you check your email? How often do you check social media? Social media, I don't know what people use these days. I don't have any social media because it's distracting. Instagram, okay. So Instagram. How often or how quickly do you drop what you're doing to help someone else? So this other person that's working with you, another student comes like, oh my God, I don't know how to do these data analyses. And you're working on your own data and you turn around and let's work on yours. Do you do that always, frequently, never, or it depends on the situation? How often do you pass on meals in order to work? And how often do you cancel a date or a family event because you have to work? Now my question is, does this help you use your time effectively? And let's do one more. How long do you estimate it takes to do each of these things? How long do you estimate that it takes you to do a load of laundry? And that load of laundry is from putting stuff, grabbing the basket to having it in whatever state it is when it makes it to your closet. Either neatly folded or just inside drawers with the drawer closed so you cannot see what's inside. How long does it take you to do a quick trip to the grocery store? How long does it take you to cook a meal from actually starting to having the meal on the table? How much time do you spend a day checking social media? Whatever you use for social media, how long do you estimate you spend on social media? And how long do you estimate you spend on email? So let's go back to this one. How many of you keep a weekly calendar? Yearly calendar? We have faculty raising their hands. Yeah, so very few of you keep a calendar. Have you entered in a calendar or somewhere you can see your degree deadlines? Do you all know when dissertations are due if you want to graduate in the spring? Yes? Yes. Some of you do, some of you don't. Do you know when dissertations, the first draft of your dissertation is due to your advisor if you want to graduate in the spring? See, those are also degree deadlines. Do you prioritize, do you have a to-do list and do you prioritize it? Or it's like a long list of stuff and then you just randomly pull out stuff from it. I mean, if you don't have a to-do list, that's not going to help you manage your time very well. Or if your list is just a laundry list of everything you have to do in no specific order, that's not going to help you manage your time very well. Do you browse your phone? Like, do you go and check social media or check the web or YouTube or whatever whenever you're waiting in line? That's the primary thing that we do, right? Is that something that helps you save time? Not necessarily. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Do you postpone tasks until you feel mentally prepared to do it? If you're very stressed out, do you pass on certain tasks? So that's also going to be a problem when you're trying to schedule and manage time. Do you answer email as soon as it arrives? So do you have a program that just blinks whenever you get an email and you instantly reply? Now we're going to see how that is terrible for your time management. And do you schedule tasks based on your energy level? Another big problem that we have because it allows us to postpone things. How often do you update your calendar? Now, a lot of you said you don't have a calendar. You need to have a calendar, and you need to make sure that you update that calendar as soon as possible. How often do you check email? Yes, sir?
Just to know, so I know you're talking about calendars, but like realistically, like in 2016, we all had smartphones, so like we use that. Like I know that's our everything. Like that's just
you check it, but you're keeping some sort of calendar.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a calendar in paper because most of the time that I have one, I lose it within the first 15 minutes of having it. But I keep a calendar is attached to my email, and that is what I mean by a calendar. Just somewhere where you have dates and a list of things you're supposed to do by the time you're supposed to do them. And you will be surprised at how many people don't even have that. I have a colleague that writes stuff on Post-its and she dumps it in her purse. So she pulls out a Post-it once in a while and realizes, oh, last week I had an appointment with the dean. And you're like, well, doesn't help you much. All right, how often do you check email? As soon as it comes in? So do you get a little ding and you do it? So I am going to tell you that is terrible for your time management. You should set times for email as often as necessary, but it shouldn't be something that is a constant distraction. How often you check social media? I saw that when I said social media, a lot of you chuckled and kind of went down. Problem, again, it should be at set times during the day. Do you drop what you're doing to help someone else? Yes, sir.
I think that's going to be one of the toughest for like the younger generation, like of graduates to like set time to check social media because they just go off. They just notify you all the time.
We're going to talk about some things that you can do. You can block it. Oh my goodness, stuff's going to happen and I'm not going to know exactly when Steven went to the restaurant and ordered a burger. I mean, just think about it.
Whoopie-doo.
Is your life going to change dramatically? If you don't know, I mean, we all have the friend. I have a friend, she's actually a colleague of mine. Everywhere she goes, she checks in, right? So if I have Facebook on, which honestly I don't have a Facebook account, but if I had it on, it will ding every 15 minutes, right? So if it dings every 15 minutes and I look at it every 15 minutes, I'm done for the day, right? So social media is going to be a great distraction. I love the fact that you said, it's 2016, we all have smartphones. That's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to our time management because it is very easy to get distracted. Dropping what you're doing to help someone else. That is a great collegial thing to do, but it also has to be on your schedule. You can't just stop every task all the time to do someone else's stuff. So it will have to depend on the situation. How many of you pass on a meal in order to work? A lot of times, how many of you skip lunch on a regular basis, right? I'm guilty of doing that, and I'm trying to stop that, so you should not, skip meals at work, or cancel family events or dates in order to work. Very frequently, that's something that you do as a student. So let's see what your estimates of time are. How long does it take to do a load of laundry? 2 hours?
2 hours. Depends on the size.
Yeah, depends on the size. So, the estimate for one person, I know I have a family of 4. 2 hours is not going to take me, and I have 2 kids. Now, that's not going to take me anywhere. But one person, one load of laundry takes about 90 minutes to complete. How about a small trip to the grocery store? That quick trip to Kroger or Walmart to get some food?
30 minutes.
You know, it's about an hour. Once you take the commute time getting there, and the fact that you're going with the cart and you're like, oh, look at that Nutella. And ooh, look at this, I'm gonna get one of these. And I'm gonna just go and run and get some milk. And then you get to the register and you go back. So it's gonna be about 60 minutes. Cooking a meal?
2 hours.
It's gonna be somewhere around 90 minutes for most people, 60 to 90 minutes. I'm not including eating time here because, you know, that will add to it. Checking social media, what do you think is the national average for that?
3 hours.
Between 2 and 9 hours for college and graduate students. Just think about that. 3, 4, 5 hours that you could be doing something else are spent on social media. Now for checking and answering email, I don't have time for graduate students, but I will tell you that for faculty members, it's estimated that we spend about 6 hours a day just doing email. So I hope that you see where I'm going with this, right? So when you're thinking about time, the best thing that you can do is think about organization. The more organized you are, the more time you're going to have. Now, I know that I promised Dr. Kasi that I was going to schedule a little break at some point so you guys take a breather from me. So this is a good time for us to stop. We're going to come back in about, oh, what do you say, 10, 15 minutes, and we're going to, no, 10, we're scheduling things, 10 minutes. And we're going to talk now about time management strategies. We're going to try to do some practical things that are going to help you get better organized and get some more.
Just getting this together, I wasn't sure what the response or the enthusiasm would be, but I'm very pleased, Dr. Jelani, that you have this many people, and you should be pleased too. We got many meetings here where we have 10 or 15 people, you know. So, why is this so important? And I play golf in the mornings on Saturdays, and I cut short my golf to run out here to at least listen to some of this, because this is a very important topic. My BS is in education, and I took a lot of psychology for teaching, so I understand some of this stuff, and it really fascinates me how easily we are manipulated as human beings. You know, it's easier to manipulate us than a dog and a cat. They actually manipulate us. They teach us what to do. But she said a lot of incredible important things that we don't have time to repeat again. But there are 2 things that I don't think she said that I will tell you from my 65 years of experience teaching. I started teaching when I was 18 years of age. At that age, I had 70 students to teach. 40 in the morning, 3rd grade, and 40 in the afternoon, 5th grade, all by myself. So I learned a few things about psychology and about people's behavior. And I thought I was really good. So when I was almost finishing with my BS, one of the Catholic nuns who was my history teacher called me to the side and said to me, listen, you're smart, no question, you got, 3-point blah, 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 but there is something you haven't understood yet. And I'm saying this to you because despite the mobilization of technology, the protection of the law, this has never changed and it will never change. And I'm so glad she told me. I was only 18. She says, look, it doesn't matter how you look at a teacher and how you look at yourself. You will always be the egg and the teacher will always be the rock. So you can get angry and smart and drop yourself as an egg on top of the rock and it will break. Or the teacher will drop on top of the egg, you, and then you also break. And I think this has a lot to do with what she's talking about. You have to make a decision. You chose to come to graduate school. I hope nobody forced you to do it. Maybe your parents did. And you want to do this, just like we all did. We all have to write a thesis. I have to do 2, master and PhD. We all write papers. I have hundreds. It's our stuff. But it is incredible, difficult, time-consuming, and dedicated, driven. You cannot do as she was saying, oh, well, I have a little headache, I do it tomorrow morning. Because it won't work. So I'm so glad that you're covering these things, and I am so glad that you are here to take advantage of this, because some of us, I don't know about Dr. Cassie, Dr. Jelani, I never had anyone talk to me about these things. And it would have made my life much easier, and I think I would have been even farther in my profession if I had someone to teach me how to basically partition the situation. So thank you so much on behalf of Tuskegee and you guys. I welcome also her and thank her for coming here and spend some time with us. Thank you very much.
Just before we turn it back to Dr. Escobar, those of you who have agreed to participate in the interview and focus group, they will be held in room 205 after this meeting. Okay, room 205. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as I told you before, we took our little break, trying to play with the microphone. What we're going to do for the rest of today is talk a little bit about time management strategies, because we all have a limited number of hours in the day. We all need to sleep at some point. We need to eat at some point. So we need to figure out how to better organize the time to get the most out of the 24 hours that we're given. So let's start by talking about some of the misconceptions we have about time. So I'm going to call this the fallacies that we would like to believe. The first of them is the planning fallacy. We tend to greatly overestimate how long it's going to take us to do a simple task. You know, I cannot count how many times I've heard a student say, oh, but reading that paper is going to take forever. So it's going to take me 3 hours to read that paper. And you have 5 pages. It's not going to take you 3 hours, but we tend to overestimate. When we overestimate the time that is going to take us to do a simple task, we tend to push that task away. So we don't actually get it started. And that's going to be a problem. We also tend to underestimate how long it is going to take us to do a long project. It's okay, I can write that paper the day before, you know, I'm going to set out 8 hours the day before it's due and I'm going to finish my paper. And sometimes that is not going to happen. So if you underestimate the time, you're going to produce a very low quality work, or you're not going to complete the task. The next fallacy that we're going to talk about, I call it the next week is free fallacy. We all tend to know that if I don't have time to do this now, we're going to be able to do it next week. And unfortunately, next week is going to look pretty similar to this week, because most of what we do is habitual. It's not going to change greatly from one week to the next. So if you actually look at a calendar, and I don't care if you keep the calendar on paper, you keep it in your smartphone, whatever you keep it. If you look at your calendar carefully, if you put everything in your calendar, you're going to realize you don't have that much free time. And if you don't have that much free time, next week's not going to look that different. And then finally, this is going to be my last fallacy. This will only take 1 minute fallacy. Oh, it's okay, I'm going to look at YouTube because it's going to take me just 1 minute. I'm going to check my Facebook because it's going to take only 1 minute. Nothing, take a minute. So you're not going to be able to manage your time very well if you are, thinking about things in the wrong way. So the main thing that you're going to have to do is learn how to use whatever time you're given in a way that is very effective. So I am going to give you a few strategies that are going to help you with time management. The first of them is to audit your time, know where your time goes. We're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Find out what works best for you. Create a flexible schedule. Get started with things. Just get started with things. Use other people to audit your own time. Just get their feedback on how you're doing. Realize that a few minutes here and there are going to add to hours at the end of the week. Use technology to your advantage. We're just talking about smartphones. Smartphones can be great tools or they can be great distractions. It just depends on how you use them. Try to avoid unnecessary perfection. This is something that a lot of students that are getting very close to finishing their dissertation are going to fall prey to. And give yourself credit for the things that you have completed. So my first strategy is to audit your time. I'm going to tell you just personally, when I started as an assistant professor, I didn't have a lot of training on these things. I got the job, I showed up my first day, they told me these are the classes you're going to be teaching, this is when you're supposed to be in the classroom. And I had just come out, my graduate advisor is an extremely productive man, he's an extremely organized man. I had achieved an incredible number of papers during graduate school, and I had a handle on this. I knew I was going to do it, so I just went there and I did what I knew how to do. And what I realized is I was about 16 hours a day I was spending in the office, and I was getting nothing done. And I called my advisor about 5 months into my job, and I'm like, I don't understand why. I'm doing exactly what I used to do, but I'm not getting anything done. And his question was, if you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, why are you not getting anything done? What are you spending your time on? And I said, like, well, I'm not spending my time, I'm not wasting my time, I'm using my time. He's like, no, if you're not getting the stuff done, you're wasting your time. You need to figure out what are you wasting your time on. And that was the greatest piece of advice my advisor ever gave me. So what I suggest is that people should take 1 or 2 weeks to audit their time. And what I mean by auditing your time is just put everything you do in a calendar. Because you're going to realize that if you put everything that you have to do in your calendar, and you then look at the times in which you don't have to do anything, your time is a lot more limited than what you thought. So once you have determined what those necessary activities are all about, then you can figure out what you have flexibility on. So I'm going to give you an example. This is kind of what my schedule will look like. I promised my husband recently that I was going to eat lunch every day, because that's the one thing that I can skip really easily and work. So I try to schedule an hour in the middle of the day. In this hour, I don't eat for the whole hour, but I can, eat and check email and get organized for the afternoon. So I'm going to block out that time. I'm going to block out, 6, that's when I eat dinner with my children, and that's time that I don't move. I never cancel that. So I'm going to block out that time. 5 to 6 is usually meal prep time, homework time, the things that I have to do as a mother to, keep my children. Then Saturday and Sunday is when I do things that are necessary for maintaining my household, like grocery shopping and laundry and things of that sort. So I'm going to block out that time. My children are in sports. That's usually when we have competitions and stuff like that. Class time and meeting times, these are things that I cannot move. I am responsible for being in class every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at a particular time. I schedule all my meetings Tuesday and Thursdays afternoon. I have to be in the lab to do student training several days a week, and that is time that I cannot move, because that is the time that I devote to each of my students for their individual time. I also need to block out the time that I spend doing research, and I block out time for writing. So if I look at my week, it looks like this. Before, I put here flexible meetings, office hours, and other things, doctor's appointments, and other things that I have to do. So in a 40-hour week, because I'm just putting here the 40 hours of the week, right? I have about 8 hours of flexible time. Now, I would like you to try to do that, and I'm not asking you to do it now, but I would like you to try to do that for a week. Just get this, and every time you do something, block it out. Whether it is talking on the phone, going to class, everything. Just put the stuff that you have scheduled on a regular basis, and then the stuff that you would like to do on a regular basis. And try to figure out, what does your time really look like? Once you have audited your time, you really know where your time is going. So for example, you mentioned Facebook before. If you're telling me that you're looking at Facebook for 3 hours and you put them in your calendar and you realize that you're spending 12 hours a week in Facebook or in YouTube, then we're having an issue with time management here. So the main goal here is to actually determine what you need to do, but what it is that you're actually doing. And that's going to give you a better handle of where your time is going. Why is it that a 40-hour week is not giving you the opportunity to do the things that you need to do? And you won't know that until you actually keep track of where your time is going. I have all my graduate students have to do this, and they all come back with what I was like, oh my God, I spend 6 hours, every other day just on email. Or I spend this number of hours just on social media. So once you become aware of where your time is going, it's much easier to actually schedule it and manage it. Another thing that I will recommend for you is to figure out what works for you. Not for your lab mate, not for your roommate, not for your mom, not for your dad, not for someone else. Because what works for one person is not necessarily what's going to work for someone else. So do not use other people's time management strategies, use your own. Some people are going to work better in one way or another way. I personally work better if I break tasks into small portions, because I get distracted very easily and I'm wearing many hats. So if I know that I'm going to be working on something for 30 minutes and I can devote 30 minutes to that something, I don't get frustrated if I need to get up 30 minutes later and change tasks. Other people are going to work better in longer stretches. You may be the type of person that can't actually concentrate for 2 hours, so then you need to schedule those 2 hours to work. Do you need to finish one task before you move to the other? Or can you alternate tasks? What is going to make your work better? The important thing is that you find yourself in task at all times. If you're saying, I'm going to be writing right now, but instead you're checking social media, then maybe you schedule too long a time to be writing. But you need to schedule that time, because if you don't schedule that time, you're not going to actually get to that task. So audit your time and then figure out what is the best strategy for you to use the time that you have. Once again, if you realize that you've been working for an hour and out of that hour, the last 30 minutes you've been distracted doing something else, then maybe it is better to set a goal of 30 minutes and then change to a different task and then go back to the initial task. That may not work for someone else, but it may work for you. So you need to try different things in order to keep yourself on task when you have scheduled that task. We talk about a schedule. Schedules have to be there and they have to be followed. You need to stick to a schedule, but you also need to have some flexibility in that schedule. So you saw that I'm giving you an example of my schedule. There are some open times. Those are going to be my flexible times. You can also, just remember that a schedule is like a contract with yourself. I'm going to complete this task and I'm going to do it this way. But if you must be flexible or you want to be flexible, you may be able to schedule time for alternate activities. So I'm either going to clean or do laundry. I'm either going to write or read a paper. I'm going to do data analysis or I'm going to do data writing. I'm going to work on my figures or I'm going to work on my to-do list. And then you choose one of the two activities for that time. But if you have scheduled the time to do something, go ahead and do that something, because otherwise you're never going to get to that task. So it's important to just get started with something. I told you before, I hate grading. I hate it with a passion. And I know Dr. Cassie has heard me say this 1,000 times. I hate grading, and there's just no way that I can get around it. So I look at the stack of papers, take a deep breath, and I sit down and start grading. And once you get started, that is the hardest thing. We're physical machines. Inertia is a problem, but once you get things in motion, it's easier to keep it in motion. So once you get started, it's easier to stay on task. Procrastination is going to be our worst enemy here. Once you start putting it off because I really don't want to grade, then I'm going to find something else to do. And then I am not going to actually get to grading. But if I have scheduled this time to grade, and my grading time is Friday mornings, and I will sit down and grade for 2 hours, and I know I can get it knocked out in 2 hours. So I need to just make sure that I use that time for grading. Because if I use it instead to go to the lab, well, it's a lot more fun. I got rats in the lab, and they're cute. It's a lot more fun to be collecting data than it is to be grading papers. So if I don't get started with it, I am never going to do it. So another thing to remember is that motivation is important, and attitudes are going to change with behavior. Once you get started with that task and you have invested in that task, normally the task becomes a lot easier because it becomes a lot more positive. Another thing that you can use is others are going to be very distracting. So use them instead to your advantage. When I became an assistant professor, I was fortunate enough that during, we have this kind of initiation week where you go and they tell you what you're supposed to do with the university and you have the opportunity to meet other faculty. I was fortunate enough to meet 6 other people that they were not in my department, not even in my college, but we became really good friends and we all went up for tenure at the same time. So what we used to do is we used to meet once a month and talk about how we were doing with our tenure dossier. And I realized that I was behind really quickly. Everybody had their stuff kind of together and I hadn't even started. So for me, this group was something that gave me that peer pressure that I needed in order to get in motion and in order to get organized. It is also easier if you're, for example, writing a dissertation and you know other students in your program that are writing their dissertation. You can talk to them about how are they handling this. How did you format this? They may know stuff that you don't know. They may save you time in getting that information. You may be able to share information with them. Very importantly, they may be able to read what you've written and give you some feedback on it. They may give you some tips on how to handle certain things. So you can actually create groups that are going to discuss the things that are important to you at that point. Whether it be comms, writing your dissertation, preparing your tenure dossier, conducting research, others can serve as kind of benchmarks for what we're supposed to be doing. So you can review your goals and achievements with this group, you can discuss progress, you can encourage each other, you can give each other timelines. All of a sudden it becomes a competition. We all work a little bit better with competition. Are you going to finish that paper? I'm going to finish before you. All of a sudden it becomes something that is a lot better because that peer pressure can work to your advantage. So others shouldn't be just the people that take time away from you. Others can also be the people that keep you on track. So try to use others in that positive way. Minutes are going to add up to hours. When I tell you that people spend 6 hours checking email, that does not mean that they sit there from 6 to 12 and check email. That just means that, you know, whenever they are doing something that is task distracting, that time is going to add up. So I'm going to ask you, what do you do when you have a 15-minute wait between events? And I saw what you guys were doing during the break. Most of you were doing this, right? Because I was doing that. So I was checking, making sure that my kids have not texted me. So we tend to use our time very ineffectively because we don't realize that a few minutes here and there are going to add up to a whole bunch of hours at the end of the week. 15-minute breaks, you know, if you have 4 of those, that's 1 whole hour. And the reality is that most of the things that we do could be done in 15-minute intervals. So a really good strategy is to, ahead of time, determine what sort of things can be done in 15-minute intervals. I always carry papers in my purse or in my bag. You're going to find, actually, if you were to poke into my backpack right now, I have a paper review and student papers that I'm grading that go with me wherever I go, because if I have a 15-minute break, I know I can knock out 2 or 3 of those student, you know, short papers in those 15 minutes. So if I have 5 breaks throughout the day, I'm done with a class. So, you know, things like grading are things that you can do very easily. Reading an article, I mean, you don't need to read an article from beginning to end. We very unlikely read an article from beginning to end in 1 whole sitting. So that is something that you can, I'm going to read the methods now. I'm going to actually take notes about how they analyze the data. So that's something that you can do in those short breaks. Work on a subset of a problem. So you can divide a long problem into small chunks and work in a chunk. Work on next week's schedule. You know, I'm going to just clean up my calendar right now. Or, you know, make a to-do list. Whatever you do, you know, if you use those 15 minutes here and there in a productive manner, you're going to get a lot of time that otherwise will be wasted. And one thing that I really encourage you to do is schedule your social media time. If you're going to be working for 30 minutes, you can give yourself a break at the end of those 30 minutes and say, I'm going to spend, you know, 10 minutes on Facebook, or I'm going to spend, you know, 5 minutes on whatever, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever people. I don't have social media, so I don't know what people use. But you can schedule that social media time. You can schedule your email time. I tell my students I check email before class, at the middle of the day, and at the end of the day. And I just try not to check email in between because I get I get 200 emails a day. That's going to get extremely distracting very easy. Now, technology. You back there, we're talking about these little things that we carry with us, you know, that they're an extension of our hands at this point. So technology is something that you can use to your advantage. And I love certain apps that you can use that are going to try to keep you in schedule. For example, Mozilla Firefox has something called Leech Block. And that is, I'm just going to show them to you. So this is Leech Block. And one of the things, so you install this app, and you can schedule which sites to block for what period of time, and it won't let you go into them. So what you're going to get is something like this. So for example, this is Leech Block for Twitter. So you're working on your data analysis, very intense. I'm finally getting these comparisons to work. I'm going to see what my friend did on Twitter. So you click your browser, you're going to go to Twitter, and it tells you that the site is blocked. So you can schedule what times you're going to be allowed to go into those sites, or for how long during the day. And you can, for example, just say only on weekends I'm going to access that. You can have different ways in which you can program this. This is a free app too. Another one is stay focused. And this one is going to give you a maximum time allowed per day that you can access a particular site. So you, for example, can set only 15 minutes or that you're going to access YouTube, or you can give yourself 30 minutes on Facebook or something like that. It's got something called the nuclear option. It does not let you go into any website at all for a 24-hour period. That's extreme, but you can actually try to do that. And if you try to access the site, it just gets, the shouldn't you be working message. So makes you feel very guilty, but it makes you go back to task. And then for Mac users, there's something called Focus Bar, and what it does is it tells you at all times, you have this floating bar that is telling you what task you're supposed to be performing at that time. So, I mean, there are many apps like this that you can use in order to try to stay focused, at least when you're on the computer. And I've given you the sites in a little handout. You can have the list of these. I really like Leechwalk just because it gives you more flexibility for scheduling. So I put that in the lab. I don't have it in my own computer because I don't have the social media, but for the students, I do have that. Now, the double benefit of doing this is that it's going to allow you to keep your schedule. So if I'm saying I'm going to work for 30 minutes with no internet access and I try to get distracted, I can't. But at the 30 minutes, I may give myself 5 minutes to browse the web. And we all know that browsing the web is going to be a major problem because it is very easy to get distracted. If you're following the election right now, you know that there's many things that are going on, and then you just click from one news report to the other and you never end. So, again, since you have technology, you were talking about using your phone as calendar, you have alarms and reminders. Use those because they're going to help you stay on task. They're going to help you remember when you're supposed to be doing things. Perfection is wonderful. It's a wonderful idea, theoretically, but in practical terms, it is something that is going to lead to a lot of time wasted. I've seen students that spend more time finding repeated words and sentences in their dissertation than actually working on content, or more time in making sure that the figures have exactly the same shades of gray than in actually putting data into those figures. So the idea of perfection is great, but sometimes that perfection that we're looking for is just a way to avoid finishing the work and content that we have to do. So long-term projects like a dissertation, because we invest so much into it, it's almost like our baby. We're going to need that perfection. But sometimes that perfection is something that is not necessary. And I know that it's kind of hard to say you need to stop at some point working on making something perfect, but you need to learn when to let things go. Here's where your advisor, your committee members, and your peers are going to be great resources. If they tell you that the work is done, trust them, the work is done. You don't need to continue formatting that document for days and days and days to make sure that all the lines align perfectly. So at some point, the work has to be considered completed, and you have to move on to the next thing. And then, of course, reward yourself often. If you don't give yourself credit for the things that you do, it's going to be very demoralizing to continue working at the pace that you're working. So use all of these strategies to try to, especially the time auditing, and to try to use the little bits of times that you have here and there. Those are things that are going to allow you to find a lot of time you didn't know you have, and is also something that is going to help you figure out where your time is going when you think that you have no time. Why is it that the day is not enough to do all the things that you have to do? So a key to effective scheduling is going to be to actually prioritize and look ahead for things. So, we already talked about all of these things that may help you better manage your time. All of these things are not going to be good if you don't have a way to determine what is important and what is not, or what should you do first and what can wait. So a calendar is a very good thing, whether you keep it electronically or in paper, or by writing stuff on your wall. A calendar is something that can help you greatly. But you need to remember that you not only look at what you need to do next week, all timelines for the long term should also be reflected in your calendar. So a yearly time window for example, school deadlines. You need a monthly time window for things that are, like class papers, term papers, things that you have to do for your advisor, and then a weekly time window for day-to-day appointments. And you should be able to look at all this and know when things are due, and know when you should be starting work on those things. Now, if the project is a long-term project like writing a dissertation, your goals have to be scheduled farther ahead than short-term goals, and you need to set up timelines for very long projects. So I had a student who told me that, you cannot see this, but it's a calendar for 2016 and 2017. She wants to defend her dissertation at the end of the spring of 2017, and approached me last week to let me know this is her plan. Now, there's no way you're going to have a dissertation by the end of the spring in 2017. Let's just try to think back. Last day to defend dissertation, that was my question. She had no idea when that is. And I can tell you that is April 17. I can barely read it, but it's April 17. So that means that her committee should receive that document for review at least a month ahead. That's going to give us March 17th. So she's like, well, we still have time. Hold on, because I need to get that document in final form for review and approval at least a month ahead of that deadline. So we're ready going to February. Now, you need to begin and finish your data analysis before you finish your document. Let's be very unrealistic and assume that in a month you can handle all your data. That means that in January, you should start with that data analysis. Before that, you need to collect data. Now, I know for experience that it's going to take you, if you work every day, including weekends, from now until then, it's going to take you at least 3 months to collect data. But we also have Christmas in the middle, so we're going to have to make sure that we account for the holidays. Now, before you can start collecting data, you need to get all of the supplies that we need. Okay, and some of these are custom-made drugs, so we need to order them, and it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get them. Let's assume that in 2 weeks we can get the manufacturer to send this to us. Before that, because we work with animals, we need to go through research compliance. Let's assume that we write a perfect protocol that requires no revisions or no reviews. So we need to submit that at the very latest in August, which, we're in October now. Now, we need to present a proposal to the committee before you're allowed to submit your compliance protocol. We also need to submit the proposal to the committee at least a month ahead. I need to get a draft of that proposal, and we need to go back and forth with it, and I know that's going to take us at the very, very least 2 to 3 months. You need to begin writing that proposal you're going to give me. So if you want to graduate in April, and everything goes perfect, that means you should have started in April, not now. If we are fortunate, she's going to be graduating in April of 2018 at this point. So when you start thinking about when things are due, and you start working backwards on things, you're going to realize that you need to start planning for dissertation at least 2 years before dissertation is due. Because you need to account for, I'm not putting here pilot data collection, I'm not putting here revisions required by committee, and you cannot graduate until you have satisfied your committee. So realistically, she needs to start at least in January with actually proposing her research plan in order to graduate in April of the subsequent year. So these are the type of timelines that I'm talking for long-term goals. Because if you don't work yourself backwards to the point that you're in now, it seems totally doable. It takes like 3 months to collect data. We're in October, by December we should have everything completed. But there's other stuff that goes around that. So that's why I keep on talking about deadlines. Do you know when the deadlines are? Do you know how much time the institution requires that your committee sees things? Does it have to go to an external reviewer? That adds another month to the process. Do you need to identify that? Do you need to submit something for publication as a requirement for your dissertation to be evaluated? So what do you need to do in order to graduate is something that you need to start thinking about now so you can make that long-term plan. Important thing, prioritize. If you don't prioritize, you're going to have just a list of things and you're not going to be able to do it. I like this cartoon because that is what most to-do lists look like. Everything is important, but that is not the reality of things. Some things are going to be more important than others, more urgent than others. They should be completed before others. And usually the problem is that when you don't prioritize that to-do list, dissertation always goes at the end because the dissertation is not due immediately. So how much priority should I give to a particular activity? There's something known as the Eisenhower Recovery System, and that is something that President Eisenhower used to talk about how he prioritized what he needed to do as a president. The idea here is that there are some events that are important to you. They may have delayed consequences. They have outcomes that if they are not met, you're not going to be able to achieve your goal. But there are also urgent events, and these usually are things that demand immediate attention. They are normally related to someone else, and they can have immediate consequences for you. So these are the things that you have to do right now. So what the idea here is that you're going to categorize things in such a way that some events are going to be rated as important or not important. Some events are going to be rated as urgent, and some events are going to be rated as not urgent. Things that are unforeseen, or if you procrastinated to the point where your deadline is tomorrow and you haven't started with the work, or you have a crisis, those things are important because they have consequences, and urgent because they are going to have to be completed right now. Some things that are not important but that are urgent, things that prevent you from being efficient. Your car has a flat tire, you can't get to work, so that's not important but it's urgent, it has to be resolved right now. Emails and texts are things that are not important but a lot of times we regard as urgent. Other people's requests, they tend to be not necessarily related to what we need to do to achieve our goals, but they may be urgent and they may need to be addressed right away. Things that are not important and not urgent are going to be anything that is a distraction or a time waster, things like browsing the web without any sort of goal. Social media, yeah, it's nice to know what our friends are doing, but we don't need to know it every second of the day. So most of your time should be actually spent in the things that are not urgent because you have planned for them, but are important because they are going to have an impact on your career. Things that you have scheduled. Things that relate to professional development, things that are going to help you maintain your health, like eating meals and exercising, things that are going to aid with relationship building. Relationships are severely strained during graduate school. So those things should actually take priority. That's why I schedule dinner time with my children. If I don't do that, I'm going to skip dinner and I'm not going to see them. And it's important for me to spend that time with my family. So all of these things are the things that should be on top of your priority list. They should receive daily attention. You of course are going to have to do some of the urgent things that you have to do. And that's where your flexible time is supposed to go into. But your scheduled time is supposed to go to those things that are important but not urgent. Because you're scheduling them, they will never have that urgency. So it's going to be quality work, work that is very well thought of, and things that are not going to catch you by surprise. The main benefit of keeping a schedule is that it's going to help you avoid procrastination. Whenever we talk about procrastination, it's a discrepancy between when something should be done and when that something is actually done. Normally, what we do is we switch to something that is more enjoyable. So for example, if I have a choice between browsing the web and grading, I will rather browse the web. But if I browse the web, I don't get to grading, meaning that I'm procrastinating on something that I'm supposed to do. So people are going to procrastinate for many different reasons. We may find a task to be unpleasant. A lot of students don't like data analysis and number handling, and they find that to be unpleasant, so they procrastinate to get to data, and that frustrates your professor because you have data sitting there that has not been analyzed. People may be disorganized. Keeping a schedule should take care of that. You should be at what you're supposed to do, so that organization is going to help you avoid procrastinating. Sometimes people get overwhelmed by the task. And when you're overwhelmed by the task, it's usually because you don't have the skill or you have not allowed yourself enough time to complete that task. So procrastination is an example of how we may focus on the emotion when resolving a stressor. Remember that I told you can try to decrease the emotion or you can try to address the problem. Scheduling addresses the problem, procrastinating addresses the emotion. So it is important that you may want to address the emotion at some point, but you need to address the problem by actually getting to work on that task. Now, procrastination is a major problem among graduate students. We're going to have students that feel overwhelmed and feel stressed out, are students that are very prone to procrastination. And most degree completion delays can be traced back to procrastination. And if you talk to any advisor who's been doing this for a while, they're going to tell you that they know when a student is going to be delayed just by seeing how that student is addressing the long-term task. A student that typically procrastinates is not a student that is going to graduate on time. Importantly, and when you were mentioning YouTube, I was laughing because I knew I was going to say this, it's going to lead to guilt. And when you have guilt about wasting time, you're going to feel more stressed out because this is the only thing that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm a student and I'm not doing it because I'm watching YouTube. My God, what am I doing? Am I fit for graduate school? All of those psychological things are going to start coming through. So in this situation, the only effective strategy really is to address the problem. You cannot be concentrating on the emotion when you realize you're delayed in completing your degree requirements. Now, procrastination is also a problem amongst faculty members. if you feel overwhelmed, you're going to feel stressed, just like was the case for graduate students. A problem when you become a faculty member is that all of a sudden you're not answering to an advisor anymore. So there's not someone that's bursting into the office and saying, where is that draft? You are the advisor, you're the one who's supposed to be doing that. So you have more opportunities for task distractions to creep in. And the more task distractions that you have, the less effective you're going to be at completing the tasks. It can lead to more stress because we realized that we were supposed to be doing things that we're not doing. And this is something that we're going to see a lot with junior faculty around annual evaluation time. They start all freaking out, you haven't done this, but you have been procrastinating, that's why it didn't get done. And in this situation, again, the only effective strategy is going to be to focus on the problem. So to avoid procrastination, you need to be able to manage your distractions. This is something that is going to make it difficult for you to actually engage in other tasks. A very easy way to do this is to schedule those disrupting tasks. So give yourself, personally, I like to check the news once a day. I told you, I take about an hour in the middle of the day. That's when I check the news. And I know that it's going to be a limited amount of time. It's going to be 20 minutes and I'm done. So by scheduling that distracting task, it doesn't creep up during other times in which I'm supposed to be engaged in other different things. You can also, I know this is going to sound terrible, but you can turn off your phone. Okay, it does have an off option. Okay? And that is something that you can do. You can turn off your phone until you have completed the task that you're doing. I have a friend, what she does is, the phone is down, every time she picks it up, when she's supposed to do something, she's got to put $1 in a bucket. And then at the end of the week, she counts how many dollars she has there. That gives her a sense of distractibility. I just personally cannot turn it off because I have children and I'm always concerned the school is going to call for some reason, but I can put it away. And purposely not answer, not check email, for example. So that is something that is going to help you avoid those distractions.
When we went on a 15-minute break, I wanted to test myself because I was like, can I turn my phone on? And be okay with that? I can't, but what I could do was I could turn off all my application notifications.
You can turn off notifications, that's a great idea, because then you don't have the distraction. Let me ask you this, how many of you are heart transplant surgeons here? Or are responsible for a nuclear plant? What will happen if you don't check your social media or text for an hour? Will anyone die? Right? So let me tell you about a time long time ago when I was in high school and we didn't have cell phones. Okay? We're not in contact with people all the time. We all survived for long enough for all of you to be here. Okay? We have billions of people in the planet because no one died in the times in which we didn't have cell phones and social media. Okay? So it is possible to put this away for a little while so that you don't have the distraction. And I'm not saying turn it off indefinitely. That can be your reward for task completion. I'm going to work for 30 minutes on this and then for 5 minutes I'm going to work on my phone. I teach a very long class, it's a 4-hour class, and I tell the students I'm going to give you throughout the 4 hours 2 texting breaks, okay? Because I know you get antsy about that. So at some point I stop and I tell you have 5 minutes to text right now. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, I want whoever got a text that was truly relevant to stand up and tell me I got a relevant text. We need 10 minutes next class. So far in the 1.5 years I've been doing this, I have about 0 people telling me that something that is truly relevant has happened. So, what I tell them is you're going to use the 5 minutes to text someone to tell them that nothing has happened. So you could totally go without that text. Or you're going to check social media to see that someone has checked into the nail salon. That's really not something that is relevant for your future. So you can avoid the distraction by scheduling those breaks. And I'm not saying that's not important. I'm just saying that if it is scheduled, it is not going to interfere with task completion as badly. As I said, you can use tools to block out websites and social media. The off button is the best tool of them all. It's something that a lot of people have an aversion to, but it's something that you can use in that way. If you can't, because you have a door, close the door. There's something called a do not disturb sign, and you know, you can put, if you put analyzing data, please do not disturb, your advisor is going to be so proud. So proud. Right, working on dissertation, you know, I'll be available at 2 p.m. Your advisor's going to get tears in their eyes. You know, it's like, oh my God, it's happening. So, you know, this is something that you can do. Learn to say no to tasks that are not urgent and not important. And I'm not saying just say flat no to everybody, but you can also schedule when those distracting tasks are going to take place. I have a little sticker that I put on my computer that says, no is a full sentence, because sometimes we forget about the fact that we don't have to agree to everything. So, you know, whenever we're talking about all of these things, remember that a lot of things that we do always because we feel the urgency to do are not necessarily the things that we're supposed to be doing. The amount of time that we spend being truly productive is minuscule in comparison to the amount of time that we think we are productive. So the idea is to bring these two in sync. So one really good thing that we can do when we're working on long-term projects is to try to break that project into smaller tasks. A dissertation, you know, it's been a long time since I wrote my dissertation, but I do write reviews once in a while, and a dissertation is pretty similar to a review or a long paper. They are overwhelming tasks. So one of the things that you can do is break it into smaller pieces. So I'm going to write my introduction. Now, an introduction is a lot easier to handle than a whole dissertation. So you can give yourself a timeline for the introduction, which is a piece of what you're trying to do. So instead of just having a huge to-do list in which everything gets there, you know, working on your thesis is usually the thing that you put off because it's not urgent, right? So it is important, but it's not urgent. So that is the only thing that is going to permeate in your to-do list from list to list because you never get to it. So what you can do is try to break down that task into smaller tasks and treat each one of those portions as a task in itself. So you have completed your dissertation. If your dissertation, your introduction, for example, if your introduction has multiple chapters, you can have as a goal that first chapter. You can ask for feedback of somebody on that first chapter. And then you have the satisfaction of having completed something. So all of a sudden, you don't have to do a full document that is going to be 150 pages. You have to write 20, 25 pages. It is something that is a lot more manageable. Each specific actions and specific outcomes and specific deadlines for completion. So that is something that helps you at least have goals that you're achieving, rather than have this big overwhelming task that you have to do at the end. So, you know, my goal will be, you know, of course I cannot train each one of you in 3 hours to use all these strategies, but at least have a sense, have an idea of there are things that you can do to be better organized. The first of them is just make sure that you audit your time, that you know what it is that you're doing, where is your time going. Use technology in your advantage so that you know where your time is going and how to better manage it. And, you know, as a final chapter in this talk, it's just the fact that you also need to remember that you also have a life. You know, time and work are not the only things that you need to balance. You've heard me talk about my children. A lot of you have children. I've seen, you know, a child in the audience here, so I know that many of you are dealing with parenting issues right now. Whenever I talk about significant others, a lot of you not, so I know that there are some significant others in your life, and that is something that you also need to balance. So this idea of work-life balance is something that is capturing a lot of attention in psychology because of the fact that we work much longer hours than we used to work. And we're seeing that the amount of time that people are devoting to their personal life is shrinking as we move through these increased work hours. And it's not only us, it is the impact that it has, not only on ourselves, but our significant others and other members of our family. I'm sure that you're all starting to get the pressure from your parents if you're not married and not have children. When is this going to happen? And you know, you start to hate that. Especially, I know the girls are smiling because that's something that is, you know, the common question from, you know, grand aunt Agnes. She's just saying, when are you going to have babies? And you're like, just leave me alone. I'm trying to work on my dissertation. But that is a reality that we have. Time continues to go by. Your life continues to move on, and you need to find a way to balance the two things. So a reality check again here is that in academia, the work is never going to end. And you may never really achieve a balance. So what we're trying to do here is as if you were adding vectors. You're going to have work going in one direction, life is going in the other direction. You're never going to be able to get to asymptote on both. You're going to have the point in which they intersect, and when they being both of them being most beneficial to you. So that's kind of what you're trying to figure out, how to fit the two of them so that you can maximize both. Now, just like the experience of stress is very unique and individual, the experience of this balance between work and life is very individual, and it has to be adjusted to the constraints of your reality. Just go backwards here. So, life changes in a way that you cannot control, and life changes, and the way in which work integrates with life should change as well. So as you become a parent, for example, your responsibilities change dramatically. As you become a long-term partner for somebody, you move in with somebody, you marry, all of your life responsibilities are going to change, and you need to adjust to that. There is no unique solution across individual, or even for the same individual, different life moments are going to have different solutions. So there are many things that you must do. You have to work, of course. You're going to have to do things that improve your career. You may be a caregiver for someone, that someone may be a non-human someone, but once you take a pet, you also acquire responsibility. You need to take care of yourself. If you're not healthy, you're not going to get too far. So you need to eat, you need to exercise, you need to sleep, you need to go to the doctor. Things that are necessary for maintenance of life. I mean, there's only so many times you can wear that t-shirt before people start walking away from you. So, doing laundry is important. You want to eat well. You need to go to the grocery store, otherwise you're not going to have any food. Money. You need to learn to manage money and finances. Friends and family are going to be important also to maintain a sense of well-being. And of course, romantic relationships, because most of you are at that time in your life in which romantic relationships start becoming, shapers for the rest of your life. You had a question?
Yeah. With this presentation here, I'm not for sure like how accurate it would be, but it seems like Maslow's pyramid. Like the hierarchy pyramid, is basically like different things you need in order to be at whole, like safety and security. If I can, I don't know. I haven't took my psychology class in like a year, so I don't remember 100%. But I know it's basically like having safety, security, knowing that you got somewhere to stay at night, knowing that you can provide for your family, your relationship, your compassion with whoever your spouse is. I guess basically the pyramid has levels of different things a human needs in order to make himself.
So the question is about, how are these needs organized in a hierarchy? And the reality of it is that it depends on, the time of your life. So for example, financial security may not be as important to a student as it is to a parent. So, time management is something that is a lot more important to someone who's working than to someone that is not working. The need for security, as you become a parent, that increases exponentially because now you have someone else that depends on you. Your needs are going to change. And I know there's that concept of hierarchy and you have the pyramid of fulfillment, but it is not necessarily going to be the same at all times in your life.
Can it help you with your stress?
Can it help you with your stress? Well, once you address the needs that you have, your stress level is going to go down. So definitely it will, but the thing is that you're kind of looking for a formula there. How much time should I devote to security and how much time should I devote to this? And there's really no perfect formula because we all have those needs, but the needs change as your life changes as well. Okay, so, just remember that the key is not necessarily to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to make sure that you schedule those priorities in a way that is very effective. And what you need to do when you're thinking about managing your personal life and your work life is you need to be able to create some boundaries, some protected times for both of them, so that one of them does not get into the other in a way that they are detracting from each other. So step one is going to be always to prioritize. You need to realize that there is no way you can do everything that you want to do. There's always going to be too little time for doing everything. So prioritizing, as we talked about before, is something that can help you determine what you can and cannot do. You need to keep one single calendar for everything. I call it one life, one calendar because you really need to make sure that you have everything. I actually may be able to. This is what. Oh, you cannot see that. I was going to show you my.
choose mirror to have both screens show.
Yeah, it's not helping me here, so let's see if I can do. All right, so now, okay, I wanted to show you my calendar, but it's not going to let me do it. So I have a calendar for everything. I have a calendar for my children's schedules. I have a calendar for my class schedules, for my lab. I have my students' calendar. They share it with me. Everything goes into one calendar because it's easier for me to figure out how much time I really have free if I have everything in one calendar. I know people like to keep separate calendars, just try to put them together. I strongly recommend Google Calendar. It allows you to keep multiple calendars in one single set. It is something that integrates very well with most smartphones, and you can have alerts of many different types. You can share the calendar with someone else, and then you don't need to share your events, but you can just share whether or not your time is free. So that's something that can help you very much. Now, keep clear information on who you want to do things with, what you're supposed to do, when and where, so that you don't get distracted from those things that you need to do. Step 2 is very important. You need to create boundaries. When your life revolves around school and projects are open-ended, it is very difficult to have a boundary as to where work ends and when family life begins. So boundaries can be physical. For example, I may say I work only when I'm at work, but not anywhere else. That's very difficult to do. So most of us are going to impose temporal boundaries. I try personally, the time that I spend with my children is something in which I'm not checking email, because if I check email, then the time with my children becomes work. And that's something that you can create that small boundary, even if it is a small amount of time. It's something that is going to help you protect that personal time. Now, remember that we're more productive when we schedule regular breaks. So a lot of this personal time can happen during those breaks. So that way you're going to create that temporal boundary, but you're going to be productive on both ends. Remember that you can say no. No, it's a full sentence. So a lot of times requests that people make are viewed as commands. Can you help me with this data analysis? And then you start thinking, oh my God, can I say no? You could say no, potentially. But we tend to also view things that we don't do as lost opportunities. So we kind of feel obligated to do everything. It is important to take advantage of those opportunities, but sometimes you need to realize that there is a cost also to taking advantage of those opportunities. If the cost is too high, they may not be opportunities that are going to help you in the long term. And also, if the request is not unreasonable, is very unreasonable, you may decide that you want to say no. The question is, how do you do it in a professional manner? So, your advisor comes and, would you take care of all this? And you say no. Well, you're going to get in trouble. If you tell your advisor, with a reason, I'm working on my dissertation, I may not be able to effectively complete this task. Maybe we can reach a compromise. That is something that is going to be received much better. So you should consider saying no to tasks in which you don't really have the time to complete them, or you don't have the expertise to complete. If I'm asking you as an engineer to please help me realize this stress schedule and this fulfillment schedule, you may not have the expertise to do it. You're going to invest an enormous amount of time gaining that expertise, so it may not be to your benefit. And if the task does not provide any sort of career advancement, maybe it's a task that is not the time right now for you to do. If you have to sacrifice your personal time to complete a task that provides no benefit to you, you should reconsider whether or not you're going to be taking over that task. So at this point, you need to be thinking about your profession, and your time is very precious. So things that have nothing to do with your career advancement, that are not going to give you any sort of gain in the long term, maybe now is not the time to do that. Better strategy than saying no is to negotiate. For example, you can say, okay, I'm going to take over that task, but there's no way that I can complete it by Tuesday. How about 2 weeks from now? So you're negotiating a timeline. All of a sudden, the task becomes manageable. Can you trade off another task for this? Your advisor says, take care of this. Like, well, I was going to be doing this task. Can I instead do this one if this is more urgent? Now you're saying no, but in a very different way. So you're trading off one thing for another. Or could you work as part of a team? There's no way I can do this on my own, but if I bring, John and Jenna into this, we may be able to complete this task by the allotted timeline. So all of a sudden, you're delegating part of your responsibilities. So it's saying no, but it's saying no in a very professional manner, or modifying things in such a way that they actually become manageable. And then remember that you need to be looking at that calendar, that schedule. Is the timeline for the activity something that you can do? As a faculty member, I get asked to do a lot of things like, giving talks. Travel takes a lot of time. Sometimes you have to say no. Even if you want to do it, it just does not fit the schedule. So you have to be realistic on what your time is and what you can do. And then, allocate your resources. Be proactive in trying to manage that work-life balance. Then another thing that is important is to regularly look at whether things are working out. If your time distribution is not working, then maybe you need to revise the goals that you have. Maybe you need to reallocate the time. Now, if your goal is to go into academia, is your personal life still in sync with that? If you're not really in synchrony with both of them, it's going to be very difficult to make them fit. Now, what are you achieving and what you are not achieving is also something that you need to regularly be looking at. And then just be ready to tweak things, but do it in small steps. You don't want a major life change that is going to be so stressful that is going to be detrimental to you. So reflect, make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Then another thing that you need to remember is that your loved ones have to be part of your life team. So you cannot ignore your family, you cannot ignore your significant other. You may need to get some compromises in order to achieve this equilibrium between work and life. And then just remember always that your emotional state does matter. We're talking about stress, we're talking about feeling overwhelmed. In the last 12 months, almost 6.5% of all Americans have reported depressive symptoms. And graduate students are above average when it comes to risk for depression. 15% of graduate students qualify for a diagnosis of depression. One of the main things that we see as a qualifier for depression in students is loneliness. You feel very alone. I don't know what all of your specialties are, but I can tell you what I do. We do a lot of work with rodents, and a lot of time is spent in the surgical room, and you're by yourself doing stuff. I also work with mollusks. Mollusks don't talk. They are actually not even cute to look at. And you spend an enormous amount of time in the dark by yourself. So, the students feel lonely. And if they don't have any time to be social, that loneliness is carried over to home. And when you're alone all the time, you feel miserable. So loneliness and isolation. And then we add to that the fact that you're constantly being evaluated, that a lot of things don't work. I mean, research is something that doesn't necessarily always come to fruition. We add stress to that. We just have an emotional state that is not the best for us to have. So, you need to take into consideration social relationships. You need to take into consideration that balance between work and life, because it is something that in the long term is going to be beneficial. One very special consideration is romantic relationships, because one of the major influences for long-term happiness is having a stable romantic relationship with someone. Even if it is a very close friendship for someone, that has beneficial life outcomes. People that are in a long-term relationship tend to live longer, experience less senility, they have less autoimmune disorders, they're less prone to diabetes, they're less prone to Alzheimer's disease. So there are a lot of benefits from maintaining relationships throughout a lifetime. But graduate school is a time in which a lot of romantic long-term relationships end. We're going to have time constraints, we're going to have financial constraints, and especially that time constraint is something that is going to put a lot of stress on us. Now, whenever you have a partner, you need to make sure that the goals that you have are similar. You're walking in the same direction. And that is something that is very, very, very difficult when you're working towards a dissertation, because the dissertation involves your entire life. So you need to make sure that somehow you maintain those common goals with your partner in order to maintain that relationship. Taking one significant other for granted is going to be a major problem. The time that you devote to your thesis is something that can have devastating consequences for a relationship. If you're dating someone, but you can only see them Friday from 2 to 3, and that's every other Friday because sometimes you have to stay in the lab, just tell me how long that's going to last. So the strain is real, and the problem is going to be real. So one thing that you can do is try to schedule, I'm going to bring that word again, time to nurture that relationship. And that doesn't have to be taking the whole weekend off. But simple activities that may be very inexpensive may actually be more relationship building than very elaborate activities. Even if it is 15 or 20 minutes of devoted time, we're going to choose a TV show that we're going to watch together. That's something that it's going to help build and maintain and support that relationship. Now, interactions with your significant other are at very high risk for becoming work-centered. Oh, we're going to go out tonight. We're going to go, my study group is going to meet and we're going to have pizza. That's going to be date night. Now, just remember that you need to have friends outside work, or you need to have friends with whom you do things that are not related to work. Now, you can also have a group of friends with whom you vent about work-related events. But if that is the only time that you're going to devote to your significant other, that relationship is not going to be very strong. So your partner can and should be your teammate. Teams are going to work better when they're trying to reach common goals. Now, whenever you have an urgent demand, it's always nice to check with your significant other. Hey, I'm going to have to stay late at work today because, and reach a sort of a compromise. Now, if you are making promises for things that you're going to do with that significant other, do try to keep those promises. That's what maintains and builds a relationship. You can also try to find an activity that you can do together. You can go rock climbing, you can go hiking, you can go biking. Something that is going to create a boundary between work and the time that you spend with your significant other. That makes people feel important, and we want to be with someone that makes us feel important. Now, if things are getting serious, as they are likely to do during this time in your life, just be ready to plan for a future together. How flexible are your career goals? Right now we continue to talk, most graduate students end up dating a graduate student. Now you start getting into dual careers. If only one of you finds a job, who's willing to move? Is the other person willing to follow you? Are you willing to follow that other person? So whose career are you going to follow? Are you willing to adjust your goals in order to make your significant other's career be good? And sometimes you're going to have to be faced with that choice. Now, finding balance means that you're going to be making decisions that you can live with and decisions that are going to be fulfilling. You need to remember that a dream job does not exist. So if you're putting off your life until you find that dream job, you may never live a life. So you need to find a job that fulfills you rather than this ideal job that you have created in your head. And that fulfillment together may be the key to that long-term stability. So when you look at couples that have been married for a really long time, they tend to fight for things that are common goals. They don't just follow one individual's goal. So the idea is to walk the path together, right? So you want to be like the penguins, and you want to walk the path together. Now, what if you're single? It's not everybody here has a significant other. What do you do? Now remember that social activities do not require a romantic partner. You can still have fun without being with someone. Now, graduate school is going to occur at a time when people actually partner up. But it's very difficult if you didn't come into graduate school with a relationship to start and maintain that relationship because your time is so constrained. So just be realistic and be honest with the other person about those time constraints. And also, remember that it is very difficult to attract somebody if all you talk about is the engineering stuff that you're doing in your lab. Your dissertation is the most important thing in the world to you, but very few people are ever going to read it or care about it. And that's the sad reality of things. So you're going to have a niche of individuals that will be very interested in your work, but your romantic partner is not necessarily one of them. So your research is awesomely boring to those people. So if you're going on a date, for the love of God, do not talk about work throughout the date. Make sure that you have something else that you can talk about. Because even our spouses, most of the time, have no idea what we do for work. If you ask my dad what I do for work, he knows that it's something to do with rats and poking them with drugs. And there's something that I measure, and I give a lot of talks about it. And that's about as much as he wants to know about what I do. Sometimes we sit down and talk in a little bit more detail, but that does not mean that he wants to sit down and every time he talks to me, he wants to know about every detail of what I do. So, most our romantic partners are not necessarily going to be as invested as we are. They are invested in our success. They are not invested in our work. Another special consideration is parenting. Life does not stop because you're in graduate school. Now, our biological clock, especially I'm addressing here the ladies in the room, your biological clock and your tenure clock run side by side. You know, you can postpone being a parent for a certain amount of time until you cannot postpone it anymore. And there's never a good time to become a parent. I personally freaked out when I realized that if I don't have a child now, my pediatrician's going to be older than me when I start taking my kid to the doctor. So I want to have a child in my 20s, meaning that I need to get busy right now. And it just so happened that I had my first child during my pre-tenure review, my second child during my tenure review, and everybody thought I was crazy. But you know what? Having postponed it until now would have made it even crazier because I travel a lot. And having a baby when you're traveling is not a good thing. So there's really never a good time to have a baby. So you just have to do it when the time is right for you. Not necessarily looking at work exclusively, but personally when that is going to work out. 26% of graduate students have children. So it is not something that is unusual. And I'm not saying that you should all run and get busy right now. I'm just saying that it may happen. And if it happens, it's something that you can handle. And actually, this is the subject of a lot of elaboration right now. We're going to have a lot of literature talking about this. And most of it is going to be related to mothering when you're working and working mothers. Because remember that females working full-time is not something that is that frequent, all this is something that is relatively recent. So you're going to have, a lot of books and a lot of articles devoted to parenting as you're going through academia. We can't forget the gentleman in the room. As females' responsibilities have increased outside the home, males' responsibilities inside the home have increased too. And we have an estimated 50% of fathers that are the primary caretaker for children. So as an academician and as a father, you're also going to have to think about how to better manage your time in order to provide your children with that time that they need. So when you're a parent and you have the academic job, you're going to be scheduling a lot because it is not something that is a choice anymore. You need to have that one calendar for one life, and you need to schedule everything so that you know how to prioritize and decide whether or not you have the time to complete or to take on more projects. Scheduling free time and self-care is also essential because remember that being a parent is a life transition. It should never be used as an excuse for not achieving the goals that you had set for yourself. It is going to make it a little bit more difficult. It is going to require a lot more organization on your part, but it is not an excuse. It's just a life transition that you're taking. Now, your kids don't care about the number of likes in your CV. They just care about the time that you spent with them. So sometimes you're going to have to make that cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not you take the new project on, or you're going to spend more time with your children. So, another thing is to remember that having a child is a personal decision. It does not matter how much anyone pressures you. You're still going to be the one who decides whether or not and when you're going to have that child. Also remember that other resources that you have may help you with your parenting responsibilities. A lot of campuses have child care centers. I honestly don't know if Tuskegee has a child care center that is associated to the university, but a lot of universities do, and a lot of child care centers actually give preference to professors in order to care for children. Find childcare and set some tight boundaries for when you're going to be with your children, and schedule. You need to schedule meals. Crock pot extraordinaire, because otherwise we will never eat. Plan ahead for holidays with no childcare. Children are going to be making it to classrooms many times. Your professors have families too. They understand that. They can give you a lot of leeway whenever you talk about your family responsibilities and what you have to do. So what is our conclusion? Because I'm talking about scheduling. I did schedule an end time for this presentation. My conclusion is that stress is part of your daily life, but you could potentially take control of at least part of it. If you reduce the subjective pressure, conflict, unpredictability, and frustration that leads to stress, you can manage your stress. By taking control of your time, you can become more effective at doing so. Your schedule and long-term plans should also include yourself and your loved ones. Just try to always find a silver lining in that situation. Just view the problems as opportunities. As you resolve a problem, you're growing personally and professionally. And whenever you can, try to spin things in a way that are more positive so that your well-being in general is going to increase. Now just remember that you will never have time to have it all, but you can always make that time work. So just to end, thank you again for the invitation. Thank you for spending Saturday afternoon with me, and thank you to the National Science Foundation that provided funding to be able to prepare this presentation.